What's up, party people? I want to talk about using LDTK with Odin, and I'm going to assume that maybe you don't know what LDTK is. Hopefully, you know what Odin is if you found this video. The fan base seems to be pretty loyal. But before I do, I want to just talk about games because, to be honest, I have been a little burnt out with software development, software engineering, programming, coding, whatever you'd like to call it. I guess I'm still programming and coding and to an extent developing and engineering with games as well, but it's been fun. It's been something that is different and really, really fun. So if you haven't seen this yet, I have this game called Odin Former. This doesn't use LDTK. All of the leveling was built into the Odin code. Really fun project. Ended up being like 700 lines of code, I think, total. So yeah, neat, right? But I'm working on something newer. Oh, crap. Okay, cool. We have an old build. I'll use the old build. So that's just going to be a bit of a pain to show off some of the things I wanted to show off. But yeah, oh well, we'll just talk and maybe not actually do much coding. And I'll just talk about the process and I'll walk you through some of the code. So this is a project I've been working on called Trials of Rentry. The name may change. It's a creature taming adventure. This also will probably change. I have been inspired by the likes of great games such as Coromon, Pal World, other games of a similar name. I feel like I can't name drop certain ones or I'll have lawyers flocking at me. But I wanted to show you kind of what I've got so far. Pardon the fact that the character doll is unclothed. But yeah, this is it. So it's a game with some movement. There's another character. You can come up and, sorry, that's a debug menu. Actually, the conversation with that character might be broken. So yeah, there's some animations, some other stuff like that. All of this is built in Odin. There we go. Yeah, this needs a new name. But yes, so you can, there's some dialogue and some stuff like that. I probably will talk more about this in general as we go. But what I want to talk about today is specifically LDTK, which is how I am designing all of these maps, all of these screens. So yeah, let's talk about that. Let's pull up some code and just take a look. So I guess the first thing, if you don't know what LDTK is, it's this application. Wow, that's really big. Let me shrink that for you. Too much. So LDTK is built by the creator, one of the creators of Dead Cells, the creator of Dead Cells. I'm not too positive. Let's see if I can find out. So LDTK, director of Dead Cells. So yeah, but you can find the site for LDTK here. It's a modern 2D level editor. It's fast, free, and open source. Fun enough. It's written in Haxe, H-A-X-E, which I had not seen before. And to be honest, I want to do some more exploring into Haxe, but that's a topic for another time. But you can see some of the stuff that they have going on here. So there's, a linear, Gridvania, free type layouts, customizable entities, support for Sprite, which I use, although I'm terrible at spriting, or pixel art. Platformers and top downs. You can see this is the screenshot that made me think, okay, this will work for what I want to use. So no isometric 3D yet, but or maybe ever. I'm not sure if they plan to do that. But yeah, so I saw this and I was like, hey, this looks good. This looks like something you could build a 2D platformer with, which is what I've mostly been building. But I have grand ambitions for a more slow burn type game that involves some shamanism and some spirits and some other fun stuff, which is what Trials of Rentry will be, hopefully. Anyways, all that to say, there's information on that here. Their GitHub is here as well. Oh, I'm not signed in. That explains why it's not starred. But yeah, you can see that's written mostly in Haxe. And I'm not going to talk too much about LDTK at this point, except maybe you're curious what it stands for. L, level, D, design, T, tool, K, kit. Level designer toolkit. But yeah, really, really cool being able to work on levels in such a way. And then to hop back over to the LDTK, we can load in. So I'm in Trials of Rentry. I could grab like the starting village here. So this is the starting village. I'm trying to remember where I have the player spawn. I think it's right here at this point. Yeah, so this is that starting village. There's not a village yet. But you have these sprites, right? So you can import sprites, and these are PNG slices, kind of like bitmaps in a way, but not bitmaps. Yeah, kind of in a way, sort of. So like if we wanted to add some water, we could, come here and just paint some water. And now we have some water. And whenever we save that, there will be water that the player can walk on, which maybe is not what you want to do. So you might want to add a collision layer. So you could add a collision layer here by doing this. And now we have a collision layer, and I accidentally went a little too high on that. So let's see. Yeah, you can see the collision layer here, that NPC, a spawn point, the player spawn point, fun stuff like that. So yeah, this is LDTK in a nutshell. I'm not going to save any of this, but you can, resize the level and do all sorts of fun stuff. Really interesting, fantastic toolkit that worked really well for me because I didn't want to jump into something like Godot yet. I wanted to just build most of this in Odin. So that's what I've been doing. And I've been using LDTK. So now the tricky part, the part that I actually want to talk about, is how in the world do you go from building this to importing this into your Odin project? So I've got a lib odin-ldtk, and then our LDTK piece. So this is a thin Odin binding that I've written. There's no package manager. There's no third-party anything. I had some help from AI assistants in this as well. I say I've written it. Honestly, for the bindings, I'd say I've written probably about 40% of them. For example, not writing the struct by hand, having Claude end up generating that struct based off of information from the LDTK repo. But yeah, this is the gist of it. So 2 Odin imports, encoding and OS, loading from file. So we have a procedure that takes in a file, and an optional allocator pointing to the context allocator. This is actually, honestly, now that I'm thinking about it, after learning more Odin, probably a bit of an anti-pattern. You probably should just set the allocator on the context before calling it, but whatever. And then the ability to load from memory as well. At this point in time, I'm only loading from file, and then loading from file is loading from memory, so it's delegating to that. We have those structs that I was talking about, so you can kind of see all the information that's packed into the LDTK files that are saved. So we've got a bunch of JSON that we have here. I'm trying to think if there's anything particularly interesting in this. Version, levels, so like a list of levels in this case, flags that you might have, table of contents, should you need table of contents, and then worlds, should you choose to make multiple worlds. So you can essentially kind of group worlds together and then have levels within those worlds, or you could do separate levels all in one world. And I think like a good example of that might be that you would have like old school Mario would be just like a group of levels, but Super Mario World would be, you would probably break things apart into like, 8 worlds where you have the overworld and you can move your Mario to the level you want to go to, and then you activate the level. So that might be a way that you might structure some of that out. You can see the level here. So there's, again, another struct, background color. This is where we start to actually get into the stuff that is like, that we were just messing with, that you got to see. So there's a background color for levels. You can set that to whatever you'd like. External relative path linking to the files. What else? Depth, X and Y, positions for the world. Some definitions. So we have entities, enums, external enums, layers, level fields, and tile sets. These are just definitions that are used by levels and the world. You can see that entity definition here. So you can see like how many entities we have, height, width, color, whether it's allowed out of bounds, all sorts of fun stuff there. The render mode. Yeah, I mean, this isn't open source, so I guess I should take the time to talk through this. I can't just point you to the repo and say, read through this. But I also don't want to spend, we could spend hours talking about every single field here. So more so just trying to give you an idea of what this looks like to import LDTK stuff into your Odin project or your Zig project or whatever project you're working with. They do have on the website for LDTK, just going to hop back to that really quick before I forget, some out-of-the-box support. So you can see Windows, Linux, Mac, like there's no operating system specific stuff. Unity, Godot, I don't know what this is, Playdate, Hacks, is Game Maker maybe, and then I don't know what this is either, but yeah, there's support in theory out of the box with some of this too. So ldtk for Go, Python, Rust, whatever language you want to use. Haskell, that's kind of wild. But yeah, whatever you want to use. Yeah, Game Maker, Love 2D. I don't know what that is. Oh, and Bevy, cool. Yeah. So some of this stuff might be out of the box, but again, if you need to write your own binding for it, it's not that bad, right? So this file does keep going for a little bit, but you can see that it's mostly structs, and we're essentially just trying to load that file and parse it into structs, and then we'll use that struct stuff farther below. Table of contents, neighbor level, field definition, TOC instance data, enum definition, different enums that we have here. So like when, allowed refs, editor display mode, the POS, text mode. Yeah, most of the structs and enums were generated by pointing Claude at the ldtk repo and saying, hey, I need to implement this in Odin. Please help me with the types. Okay, so what else? So source world map. Oh, we have an unused import. Let's fix that. Okay, cool. So our map. Why did that break everything? I don't know. I've upgraded Odin and have not worked on this project since, so I need to clean some stuff up, I guess. But we have some imports up there, some specific imports for the project, our ldtk stuff that we have, raylib for drawing. You can see we have NPCs here, so we have structs for this, camp zone, warp zone. So I guess worth mentioning, the camp zone is essentially a location on the map where I don't want to have like a center where you can go and heal your summons, your spirits. So instead you get to camp, and you can camp in different zones you can camp at specific zones in different levels. So it's kind of like a pop-up healing, resting area that you can do. That's the plan. It's not implemented yet, but we have support for it in the maps. But actual Odin code still needs to be written. Some information on the maps again. So this is kind of important, right? So we just looked at ldtk, and we had maps in ldtk, or we had levels, I guess. I don't necessarily need all of that data that we pull in from ldtk with the bindings. So we're essentially shimming this down to the things that are really relevant for me. So in our case, width, height, tile size, collision layer, object tiles, ground tiles, any NPCs, any warps, camp zones. This is not ldtk specific at this point, remember? Neither are technically warp zones, they're just entities. So we are taking the ldtk stuff and making it specific for my game at this layer. Make map is a procedure that actually generates that map. So you can see we're generating a map with width, height, tile size, and then we're cloning the tile set key, and then we have our tile set columns that we pass in. We're making a bunch of 2D arrays to hold things. So we have our ground tiles. So it's, like you can imagine the 2D array and the grid on the map that we just showed you through the ldtk piece when I actually booted up ldtk and loaded a map. So you can kind of see how that would fit together. So we have our ground tiles, object tiles, collision layers, and each of these are tiles, right? NPCs, warps, camp zones, spawn points, these are all locations. The ability to destroy a map, should we need to free up that memory. Collision queries, so checking whether the map is walkable, whether the map is tall grass, whether we, get warp, need to get an NPC location. All of these are essentially scoped to the map. That's why they are prefixed with map. Loading the ldtk map, so you can see here, we call that load from file from ldtk on the path that we have. An interesting thing about this is that the maps are currently being shipped as separate files with the produced binary. So they're loaded lazily, they're loaded dynamically, they're not statically linked. So what's kind of neat about this is, in a way, you kind of built in mod support by allowing people to build their own maps via ldtk. I don't know if this is a good idea or a bad idea. My opinion on that may change when I get closer to shipping this, if I ever do. And we'll see if it makes sense to let people modify this type of stuff. But honestly, for a single player game, I don't necessarily care. I think if you are playing this game and you play it the way that I intended, that's great. But if you find that you need to do something where you would rather change the map to make it more interesting or add entities to help you, maybe I made something too challenging and it's more accessible for you to add a camp zone in the final level or something. Like, okay, sure, I don't care. Enjoy the game. Like, I gave you the direction, but if you need something to make it more accessible or approachable or whatever you need, like, yeah, fine with me. Um, yeah, so what else in here? Loading the LDTK map, finding the specific level that we're looking for. So we have a pointer to the LDTK level. We're searching for that, and then we assign that pointer. Some print lines just to make sure that things are going well. Looking at our layers and switching off the identifier to determine what we should load. So if we're loading ground tiles, object tiles, collisions, entities, all sorts of stuff. We have an outer label here for this loop, and then we have an inner loop inside. We do some breaking on this point, but essentially we're looking at the actual tile set that's used and setting that appropriately. Looking at solids and grass specifically because this is a game inspired by wonderful creature collecting games, and tall grass seems to be something that works really well for that. To be completely honest, I don't know if I'll continue to use tall grass when we get closer. We might find something better that makes sense, kind of like a spiritual mist, maybe, or something to, play more into the flavor of this shaman that goes around and binds spirits to totems and uses them to help save the world, or whatever the ending premise will be. Not entirely sure yet. Loading tile layer, collision layer, entity layer. You can kind of get a gist of like how this would work. I mean, sorry for just like fanning through the code really quick. There's not a ton going on here that's particularly interesting. Same with the collision layer. They're actually very similar. Worth mentioning, on the collision layer, we do have, and this might be based off the way that I structured things and maybe not the best approach, but tall grass is considered a collision because I have put tall grass on the collision layer. So there's an indicator that something is tall grass. This is interesting because it visually could be something else, but counts as tall grass. So a good example of this might be all of a cave in like those normal creature collecting games might technically be tall grass, even though they're not visually tall grass. So this is probably a bad name at this point because it's, not necessarily tall grass. I should probably make this like encounterable or something. But yeah, it's kind of the idea. Loading the entity layer. I'm going to speed up through this and make sure we actually have time to get through everything that's particularly interesting. Some private helpers, field strings, field booleans, drawing the map layer. So having that raylib texture that is passed in. I'm using a texture for the entire application. We write to the texture and then we render the texture to the window. So I'm not writing directly to the window or anything like that. So you can see, we're taking in that tile set and then doing stuff on that tile set. Drawing an NPC sprite. So again, more drawing. We take in that NPC, we take in the tile set, and then a function that gets the sprite and returns a texture 2D. You can kind of see how this is working. Honestly, there's not a ton going on here. It is exactly what it sounds like. Take in the tile set, load the necessary sprite, and then draw it via raylib. So yeah, you can see right here, draw texture rectangle. There you go. And the sprites are rectangular, of course, for collision purposes and consistency purposes. I do have a collision debug layer, so if you hit C while running the application at this point, it will draw that collision debug and just makes everything red if it is tall grass. Or sorry, if it's hard collision, it'll be red. If it's tall grass, it'll be green. And then if it's not either of those things, it is walkable, and then just don't change the color at all. But it's just a nice little debug tool. Still have a long way to go on the campfire stuff, but here's essentially where I'm starting with this. So being able to highlight somewhere in the map somehow that this zone is a campfire zone. Currently doing this with colors, but the long-term plan is to use sprites that make it look like it is like the dirt's patted down and maybe there's some old things that have been left, maybe like a stump and like a burnt fire pit or something. But yeah, that's the idea. I don't need to talk too much about the game and more about the LDTK stuff, I guess. But Drawing the warps, so making sure that those exist. This is honestly, this is probably something that I don't need to do. This has been helpful for debugging because I'm drawing them so they're visual and I know exactly where to go. But all of these warps should be replaced by like doors or holes in the ground with ladders or, you know, whatever. I had this test map stuff for when I couldn't find anything when I first started working locally and just essentially debugging, loading the LDTK stuff. What else? I really think that's kind of the gist of it. So if I search with grep, we can see like world.level. No? Yeah, okay, cool. Sorry, here we go. So that's our map. If we actually look at the game itself, and there's quite a bit going on in here, so bear with me. We have that game struct here, and you can see somewhere in here we should have references to our map. Storage, blackout canvas. Oh, it's in game state, isn't it? Ah, okay, yeah. Sorry. So we have a union for our game state. It's a tagged union. You can either be at the title, the overworld, the dialogue, the menu, the battle, the map transition, the game over, or the starter select screen. So whenever you're in one of those screens, they all have a world associated with them. So you can see, well, maybe not all of them. Game over doesn't, but most of them have a world associated with them. So the starter select screen has a world here. It has a game camera, it's some choices to help you find your first shaman that you're going to bind, or your first spirit that you're going to bind. And then some indications whether something's selected. The state map transitions the same way. So you can see that there's a world, a game camera, map transition phase, fade timer, target map, target spawn, and that handles fading whenever you warp between zones. Menu, you'll still be in the same world when you pop up the menu, but it's a different, like the game logic that handles your key presses, for example, when you have a menu pulled up is different than if you were in a battle or if you were in a dialogue or in the overworld or whatever. So yeah, I think that's really kind of the gist of it. Hopefully this was helpful. I guess the point I want to get at maybe that one last thing I should probably talk about. So if we look at assets, is it data? It is data. Okay. So what does this look like, right? So the starting, probably should actually fire this up in something else. JSON, right? So this is the output. I totally should have talked about this sooner. But once you do the ldtk piece and save your file, you might wonder, what in the world is this actually saved as? It's just JSON. And that's why we were able to just parse everything so easily in the ldtk bindings file that I showed off earlier. But yeah, you can look at this and just everything's JSON. Is it a lot of JSON? You bet it is. And this is just the starting village, the 2,388 line starting village that we saw again, which is this one, load starting village. And again, I don't know why that full screened again, but we'll make this reasonable sized for you. Yeah, so like this. This is 2,000 lines. So there's, collision information. Actually, there's 4 layers here. So there's objects. There are ground layers. Sorry, objects. If we turn objects off, we have our ground layer. And then we have our collision layer. And then we have our entities. So there are 4 layers here. So, 2,388 lines of JSON doesn't necessarily seem bad. And it has like information about the tile sets. So if we actually look for this in the this piece here, we should be able to see something assets somewhere. So you can see that it breaks the tile sets out via rel path, which again, we talked about in our ldtk bindings piece. And this is essentially indicating how the images need to be split up when they are layered into the ldtk world. I think that's it. I'm unfortunately running out of time to record this too, so I will go ahead and wrap this one up. Hopefully this was helpful. I have been having a blast building this game. I have unfortunately coded myself into a bit of a black hole, and I need to fix my bugs. I was hoping to show you the battle screen as well, since that is working fairly well. It's still in progress, but fairly well. But maybe I'll save that for another time, and we can just talk more about the game as I continue building it. So yeah, I would love to know your thoughts. I mentioned this at the very beginning of the video, but I have been feeling a little burnt out and maybe demotivated, and just not finding as much joy from old school programming for me, which is, building web stuff and building mobile stuff and building, things of that nature. So I've been exploring a lot of new things, and Odin and game dev have really popped up and provided a lot of joy. So I'm curious if you are maybe on a similar path or have found joy in these languages or game design or anything of that nature. If you don't mind, I would love to know in the comments below. Outside of that, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. A thumbs up helps me. I'd like to think that helps you find better content and not just rage bait on YouTube. And yeah, there's a link to join our Discord if you want to talk about this video or just anything. Happy to have you around. Thanks, and have a great day.